Hollywood. Holly should they, though.
That's amazing. Welcome to Lights, Camera, Remake, where two filmmakers try to answer the question, has Hollywood run out of ideas? The answer is not as firmly rooted as you think. Is that silly?
It is, and I love it.
Okay.
In the list of films grossing over $1 billion at the box office, 23 out of 29 were a sequel, remake, or a reboot.
Whoa. I'm Bridget LaMonica, a camera operator and Steadicam operator.
I'm Erica Strout, camera assistant, music video director, and singer-songwriter musician.
This week's episode is my pick, and I chose Little Shop of Horrors. You might be somewhat familiar with the 1986 musical starring Rick Moranis. From what I understand, though, this was your first time seeing it, right, Erica?
Yes, this is my first time seeing the 1986 version and the original.
Yeah, so this was all new to you.
It was, and I remember hearing about it over the years, and I don't have any way to pinpoint what it was that kept me from watching it.
It's just one of those things. You didn't get around to it.
I didn't. It came out when I was 4.
Right.
My parents are very conservative, I don't think this is the kind of movie that appealed to them.
Probably not.
They won't watch any films that are rated R to this day, and they're both in their late 70s.
Incredible.
Which I find shocking, personally, because there are so many films that get rated R that are really fantastic.
Sure, yeah.
And also, I remember watching a documentary one time about the MPAA and how basically what they're doing is just deciding. There's no, hardline criteria that they use to rate films.
Yeah.
They're just the morality police on filmmaking, and
yeah, it's arbitrary, right?
That's a good word for it.
I remember this from a TV show I worked on. The running joke, but also the legit, literal rule was we can have 2 shits per episode. I'm not even joking. That's literally what they said. They would literally go to the script supervisor and be like, did we do too many shits this week? So let's get into it. The Little Shop of Horrors started as a black and white 1960s comedy horror film directed by Roger Corman and written by Charles B. Griffith.
I was surprised at the quality of the humor in this film.
It's cute humor, right? I still chuckled at it. Some of it was kind of silly, but some of it was like, oh, that's legitimately funny.
It is, yeah. And also, dark.
Yeah, it's dark.
It's darkly humorous, and I feel like they did a really good job of that.
Did you get the joke of Mrs. Shiva?
I didn't catch her name.
Okay.
But
she's a Jewish woman, and she's sitting Shiva for her family members. Literally, they're dropping like flies.
I mean, one begs the question, does she have a plant of her own at home that
oh my
might be eating up her family members?
I mean, sounds like it could be a common problem.
Just sounds fishy. The guy eating the flowers was really interesting too.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah, I get why they left that out of the remake.
They let certain things fly, get edited out for the later versions. We've got an IMDb description up here if you could read that.
IMDb says, a clumsy young man working at an impoverished flower shop discovers that the strange plant he has been nurturing has an insatiable appetite for blood, forcing him to kill to feed it. And I love how he can't bring himself to actually heartlessly murder someone.
No, he's so, the word I described this Seymour is hapless and helpless. He's just like, oh man, I don't want to kill, and then he accidentally kills people over and over again.
I love that they kept that element in for the second one.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing about his character. It's so you can still root for him. He's not really a murderer, but I mean the lines get a little gray towards the end of both movies. So if you're up for it, let's read the synopsis.
Seymour is a clumsy assistant at an ailing flower shop in Skid Row, Los Angeles. His boss, Mr. Mushnick, is very down on him, and his coworker Audrey doesn't look at Seymour romantically at all. The flower shop desperately needs more customers, and Seymour talks about a plant he created. If Seymour succeeds in bringing in more business, he gets to keep his job. His boss gives him a week to bring the plant to a flourishing
Yeah, because he brings in the
state.
plant, right? And he's like, here it is. And then it immediately wilts. And the boss is like, this sucks. You better put this together. This better be flourishing or else you're out of a job. I'm like, wow, that's a little harsh, but okay.
Mr. Mushnick's not very nice.
He's a lot.
So once we see Seymour go home, his life is even sadder when we see that his mother is a hypochondriac. At first, she seems to have made herself bedridden. She insists that she has every malady known to man. Seymour, he ends up naming his new plant Audrey Jr. In the 1960 version, it's Audrey Jr. In the 86 version, it's Audrey 2. And overnight, it looks really sickly. He tries everything to get it to thrive. Finally, he accidentally cuts his finger, and he finds out that Audrey Jr. likes blood.
No fertilizer, no spritzing with the water bottle. It's just, hey, blood or nothing.
Which is why it's been struggling. Mm-hmm. So Audrey Jr., after getting blood out of Seymour's finger that he accidentally cuts, grows overnight and starts bringing in all this business. People are coming in just to look at the plant. A hilarious moment happens where these two women come in and look at the plant and they're like, this is amazing. And then they're like, don't you want to buy some flowers while you're here? And they're like, oh, we don't have any money. We only have $2,000 to spend on a parade float.
What? We don't have any money, but we have $2,000. That threw me off so much.
Yeah. And we're like, we're just going to cover it in flowers. And we only have $2,000 to spend in 1960.
In 1960, yeah.
Which seems like an insane amount.
That's like saying I only have $10,000 to spend on flowers.
I know, right?
And I'm looking around the shop and I'm like, there is not enough flowers in this entire shop to do any of that. So good luck.
Yeah, right. I do appreciate it's like that juxtaposition comedy where somebody says something and then like the opposite
That's
immediately comes up. And
good rule of comedy.
Yeah.
It's like you say something and you're set up for an expectation and then it's turned on its head.
Seymour bleeds himself every night to feed the plant until he can't physically do it anymore. Mm-hmm. I think at one point he says, I need to keep some for myself. I'm already anemic.
I know, I'm already anemic. He's like so cute when he says that. Like
this poor guy. In a fit of desperation, he goes to the train tracks and laments his fate. Frustrated, he throws a rock at a bottle, but instead hits a man who just pops out immediately, like suddenly.
Yeah.
He accidentally kills the man with this rock, and he wraps him up and cuts him up. I guess he cuts him up and then wraps him up, and then he takes him back to the plant.
And he's like, here you go, and feeds pieces of this guy.
And he looks really tormented the whole time, but he still does it.
He still does it, though. You know, it could have been an accident, but he's like, no. I'll just lean into it. Mm-hmm. But again, that first death is like so accidental. He did not mean to do it.
He ends up with a toothache and he goes to a dentist who is a complete sadist. Mm-hmm. And a scuffle ensues. And he accidentally kills the dentist. They start sword fighting with dental equipment at one point,
which was ridiculous. I loved it.
It was so ridiculous. And it was like... It was like sword fighting with toothpicks almost.
It was so tiny, like these little instruments. Ting, ting, ting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then some amazing shit happens, and we see Jack Nicholson come in shortly after for some really torturous dental work because he's like really excited about it. And you could tell he himself is a masochist.
He's into pain. He's like, I'm not afraid of it. I actually really like it. It's such a weird role and a very young Jack Nicholson, which is funny because he's halfway through the movie in a bit part, but everywhere I saw this movie advertised, it was like Jack Nicholson starring in The Little Shop of Horrors. It's like he was a bit part. Like they're just trying to get people to watch it, I guess. I don't know. It's a weird thing they do with old movies.
I kind of appreciate that they do highlight that though, because seeing Jack Nicholson as a very young man acting in something,
cool, yeah.
It was, I like seeing people when they were younger and like seeing what kind of work they did.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, Jack Nicholson, he does real good. He does his Jack Nicholson. I can't do his voice.
He has that voice. Yeah, no, it was close. I liked it.
I want to do it again, but I'm gonna.
Hey, doctor.
I'm here for I really wanna. I like.
Sounds like such a creep.
And then but then he leaves and he's never seen again. So things escalate as two police officers start investigating the disappearances of both the train worker and the dentist.
And then later it adds to it because there's a few more deaths that happen.
Yes.
There's a working girl who's really trying to charm Seymour.
She's a sex worker. We can just call her.
She is a sex worker, and she is working it.
You see her like just suddenly appear, like she's magically like ahead of him again as he walks down the street. Like every time he ignores her, she like makes her way somehow magically like way ahead of him.
That was pretty great.
Like, oh, it was a fun, fantastical touch, I thought. And so there's a lady who comes into the shop and is like, when are these flowers going to open? It has like all these buds on it at this point.
This plant has buds on it, and it's obvious that they're going to bloom into these big flowers.
Right. So she's like, when is this going to happen? We're going to bring you an award for plant like horticulture or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
So on the day that he's predicting that the flowers will open, the flowers open up, and suddenly in the flower, like the center part of the flower, not the petals, but I don't remember what the middle part of the flower is
center
called.
part of the flower, you know.
Hopefully you know what I'm talking about here. You can see the faces of the people who have disappeared, who have been eaten by this plant.
Yeah.
And everyone's horrified, of course. And there's a whole like chase scene that ensues where Seymour's running from the cops. The cops are trying to find him. Mr. Mushnick's with the cops trying to find him.
Out of breath. I'm just like,
In a weird twist of fate, at one point, Mr. Mushnick is sitting down. They're in like an old junkyard or something.
With the tires, right?
With the tires.
Yeah.
He's sitting on a tire, and Seymour tries to Seymour tries to run by him.
Oh, yeah.
And Mushnick puts his foot out to trip him, which normally Seymour would.
Yeah.
He's so clumsy, right?
Right. He should have tripped.
He should have tripped. But he totally, like, just leapt over it and kept running.
Yeah, and Mushnick ends up tripping the cops by accident, which gives Seymour time to get away. Like,
yes.
It's a funny little chase scene that takes place over a while where they're running through very industrial areas in this junkyard full of tires, and then finally Seymour gets back to the flower shop.
Right. And when he gets back to the flower shop, the plant's like, feed me again, because I'm hungry. It's such a ridiculous.
I'm starved.
It is. It's a really nasal. Yeah, you're right. But he grabs a knife and he jumps into the plant to I guess try to destroy it.
I had to interpret it as he's trying to kill it from the inside, but you literally just walked into its mouth. Like, of course it's going to close on you. I mean, I was like, Seymour, you could have found another way.
He's hapless. He's kind of an idiot. Yeah.
He's a little
What is
precious.
it, the schlemiel of the thing?
I don't know, but I think as far as he's concerned, he didn't have enough forward planning to think this out.
I know these are old terms, but my understanding is the schlemiel is the person that spills the soup, and the schlemazel is the person who gets the soup spilled on them. So
That's
I mean,
fantastic.
I think maybe there's elements of both in Seymour, but yeah.
I wonder if there's those words in that book you gave me. I'm about halfway through it.
Oh, the Lost Words?
Lost Words book, yeah. It was great.
Oh, I'm glad you like it.
I do. I enjoy it.
I was wondering about that. Okay, so Seymour gets eaten by the plant, and Mushnick and the cops, they go back to the flower shop. Audrey and Seymour's mother is there, and they see the last flower bud open up, and it's Seymour's face.
Yeah.
And he just goes, I didn't mean it.
That's the last line.
Oh,
my goodness.
So, but there's a really great scene, too, which isn't, I think, it's not vital to the plot, but Seymour and Audrey, at one point, she kisses him, and he's like, you don't have to kiss me. And it's this weird, super awkward thing where, they go back and forth with her being like, don't you like it when I kiss you? And he's like, of course I do.
She was more, she was a little bit more into him from the beginning in this movie than she is in a later adaptation.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, I forgot about that, but you're right. She's very cutesy about it.
Mm-hmm. And then he's like, would you like to kiss me again? And so they kiss again, and then she ends up going... He wants to take her out to dinner. He's like, oh, I forgot I don't have any money. And then she's like, she's like, that's okay. And then he's like, well, maybe I can call my mom and she'll cook for us.
Oh my God, the
which
mom
is like
scenes. I forgot about that one mom scene where he has Audrey over for dinner at his mom's house. And since she's this crazy, like, a caricature of a hypochondriac, she makes food that involves medicine in it, like a bunch of medicines, and it's like basically unedible. But Audrey is so sweet. She's like, I don't know, I kind of liked it. Like
she makes soup as a bowl of cod liver oil, and she dusts it with like some kind of sulfur powder
Dear
on
God.
top.
I think there was something else in there that was like completely inedible, but
Oh yeah,
amazing.
It all sounds nasty.
Yeah. His mother doesn't advance the plot except for the fact of just showing how depressing his home life is and
Yeah.
how like basically helpless he is, I think.
Right, and she's clearly got him under her thumb.
Oh yeah.
And when he talks about getting married,
He's
she's
like, oh,
you
gonna
don't
leave me.
Yeah.
So,
She's
yeah.
very much, which is kind of a bummer to see, women getting portrayed that way. But at the same time, I
Yeah.
get why it's part of the thing.
That
Like,
was her
it shows
character.
more of why he is the way he is.
Mm-hmm. The movie was almost titled The Passionate People Eater, which is a stupid title, and I'm glad they threw that right away before it was released. I know, right? It's hard to come up with a title, but like Little Shop of Horrors, or actually in
It sounds too
1960,
close to Purple
Yeah.
People Eater,
It
which
sound-
maybe
that's
was
I
what they liked.
That's what I was thinking of, the Purple People Eater. So the budget for this movie was around $22,000 to $28,000. That's not a lot. In today's dollars, that's about $240,000, which is not a lot of money to make a feature.
No, it gets expensive real fast to make a film. Even a short film can cost a lot.
Yeah, people spent thousands of dollars just on a short film. But that's also part and parcel because this movie was just made on a whim. Director Roger Corman only made this film because he had basically access to these leftover sets from this movie called Bucket of Blood. And he was like, okay, I'll just film a movie here. And so the interiors of Little Shop of Horrors reused those sets, and they were filmed in about 2 days.
That's Tyler Perry quick.
Yeah, which, I mean, if you ever know how I feel about those productions, they are done way too quick. They do like one take and move on. Was it out of focus? I don't care. One take, move on. Did somebody's wig fall off? I don't care. One take, move on.
That is absolutely wild, and I
Yeah.
think it really speaks to. I don't want to tear Tyler Perry down himself specifically. I
think
feel
he's
like it's bigger than him.
Yeah, I think his style I don't care for. I think he's a good businessman in other ways.
There's a quantity over quality thing that's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, not right now because there's not a lot of things getting filmed at the moment. They don't care so much about the quality of what they're putting out. They're just wanting things to get done and like released.
Yeah, I
Just
think
to have
so, too.
anything.
Yeah, honestly, my thing at the end of the day is I don't want newbie filmmakers going, hey, I can film a feature in 6 days because, yeah, you probably can. I've seen features done in 7 days, 14 days. But like even the 20, 30-day features I've worked on have been really hard scheduled things. Like that's a struggle to get through. And I feel like crews are a little bit abused in those circumstances. They're the crazy hours and just what they're expected to do. So if you have the ability to push it out over some more time and give people more reasonable schedules, I feel like you get a better product in the long run. And that's honestly why I'm kind of like harsh on Tyler Perry sometimes, because I feel like that's inspired a bunch of people who say, I can just make I can make a movie with 2 days and I'll just make everybody work for free or something.
Yeah.
We think, from a lot of sources I read, we think that this movie is actually based on some short stories. There was one called Green Thoughts, written by John Collier in 1932. There's The Reluctant Orchid by Arthur C. Clarke. And there's also the 1894 story by H.G. Wells called The Flowering of a Strange Orchid. I actually read that story. It was somewhere on the internet. It was easy to access. It's a quick story. And it's just about this orchid collector. He's just this guy in the 1800s who collects rare orchids. He finds this orchid that was crushed under this explorer who they thought died of leeches sucking his blood out. But this guy brings this orchid back home and the orchid attacks him and sucks out his blood. Yeah.
Wow.
So we think that the movie comes from that. So
That's from 1894?
1894, right? That's metal for 1894.
Yeah, that's wild.
So
what about
that's 3 short stories that inspired this film. So, we've already opened a Matryoshka doll of remake ability here.
That's cool to like have multiple sources too, right? Like that brings a more dynamic story in if you're pulling from multiple sources.
Yeah,
and inspiration.
And I think when Roger Corman was just casting around for an idea, reportedly he came up with a few ideas he could have shot. One of the ideas was a cannibalistic chef. But I think that might have been harder to get past censors or whoever, so he changed the chef to a plant. And so who knows if he read these stories and then
Same thing,
came up
basically.
with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it seems like they're very...
Chef, plant.
They seem very connected.
How could you realize that a plant wanted blood instead of water or plant food? Like, I think that was one thing I thought about mostly after watching the 86 version.
Yeah.
Where Rick Moranis starts sucking his finger a little bit after he
pricks his finger.
He sucks on the blood out of his finger. And then the plant starts making the sucking noise too, right? Like, and then he's like, what? And then he starts to put it together.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's actually kind of genius. But yeah, it is also ridiculous.
Yeah, so in the 1961, it's so silly because I feel like they didn't time it right, but then again, they shot this thing in 2 days. So
sure.
So he's moving a plant next to Audrey Jr. and it cuts him and he goes, ow, 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 and he starts flapping his hand around. But then little Audrey Jr., which looks like a fuzzy little avocado, is just snapping open and closed on the table.
Is it presumed that there's blood coming out of his finger that might get into the mouth of the plant in that moment?
Something either dripped on it and it went crazy, or maybe it smelled the blood. I don't know. No one really, we didn't world build too heavily here.
Right, again, 2 days, to be fair.
And then he immediately puts it together. It's so quick. He's like, blood? You like blood? Well, I guess there's no accounting for people's taste. That humor.
It's so good.
So this was the 1960 version. The next version was actually an off-Broadway musical in 1982.
It's a good year.
It is a good year. Why is it a good year, Erica?
It's my birth year.
Yeah.
Also, Thriller came out and Blade Runner.
Ooh. Oh, wow.
It was a good year generally, but
okay.
It was also a good year because me.
I mean, I'm going to accept that as the only reason.
Oh.
So the play starred Lee Wilkoff as Seymour and Ellen Greene as Audrey.
She's fantastic.
She's fantastic. The book and lyrics were written by Howard Ashman.
Alan Menken did music here.
Oh, yeah. He's also, oh my gosh, he's
and he went on
name.
and did like Disney stuff, right?
I think so. American composer, pianist, music director, record producer, best known for scores and songs for films produced by the Walt Disney Animation Studios and Skydance.
Okay, I got a little IMDb brain.
So the musical retained most of the main premise from the 1960 movie, but it did change a lot of details. The setting was changed from Skid Row, LA to Skid Row, New York, probably reflecting the fact that it's on Broadway.
I didn't realize that like Skid Row, like I kind of just thought it was like a conceptual thing.
Like that's a bad
use the
neighborhood.
Word ghetto, it's like that's an old term too. But apparently Skid Row came from logging towns where they would like drag the logs down the road.
Skid Row. And then eventually that became associated with a bad type of neighborhood. Wow,
yeah,
that's
with
incredible.
like a rundown, like very poor neighborhood.
Man,
but Skid Row is a generalized term, but it's also a specific location in LA.
While not officially designated, Bowery area of Lower Manhattan has historically been considered New York's Skid Row.
Okay.
The stage play removed Seymour's hypochondriac mother, the investigating cops, and the masochist dental patient. And also it had the dentist killed by laughing gas instead of being stabbed. I kind of wonder if it was just more practical for the play and also make it so that Seymour didn't kill him. Oh, and also this is the first time that Audrey Jr. is renamed Audrey 2. So this all sounds familiar, right? This is basically the 1986 film.
Except they did bring back the masochistic dental patient
but
for
they
the film.
brought back the masochistic dental patient, which I mean, Bill Murray, hello.
Yeah.
So we're moving on to Little Shop 1986. This was directed by Frank Oz, written by Howard Ashman, same person who wrote the musical. It stars Rick Moranis as Seymour and Ellen Greene, again, as Audrey. And the cast is stacked. I mean, we had Steve Martin. We had Levi Stubbs of the Four Tops being the Plant's voice. We had Bill Murray, as we mentioned. There was a lot of names in this movie.
Yes, and I don't remember the name of this actor, but the guy who played Mr. Mushnick was the father from Moonstruck.
That's right. I think it was Vincent Gardenia, which is hilarious because his last name is also a plant.
Yes.
So can you...
It's probably the only reason they cast him.
I mean, that's kind of funny. I thought he did a good job.
Can't be his talent. No, I'm just
I
kidding.
mean, can't possibly be talent.
No, he's a good actor. I'm just being silly. IMDb says a nerdy florist finds his chance for success and romance with the help of a giant man-eating plant who demands to be fed. Feed me.
Feed me. So yeah, the character's name changed again. We added 3 chorus girls in addition to the neighborhood girls, and they basically comment on events throughout the story and basically back every song up.
They serve as narrators.
You know what I kept thinking, and this might be off base, but they kept reminding me of the muses in Disney's Hercules. Okay, so at $25 million, it was the most expensive Warner Brothers picture at the time. It even surpassed Aliens, which was only made for $18 million.
Aliens is such a great film.
I actually can't believe that was only $18 million.
I wonder if they reused any of the stuff from the first one.
Yeah, I don't know. $25 million for Little Shop of Horrors.
Wow.
They filmed on the 007 soundstage at Pinewood Studios, and that stage is literally so big they couldn't heat it. So one of the fun trivia things I learned is that you could literally see the actor's breath when they were singing. So in order to counteract this, they would have them like suck on ice cubes to cool down their mouth, and then spit out the ice cube and then do their lines and they're singing.
This is the absolute worst thing you can do for your voice before you're supposed to sing.
Well, tell me, you might have some understanding in these things, aren't you, Miss Singer-Songwriter?
I am. I've had to figure out how to take care of my voice over the years, and sucking on ice cubes sounds like the exact opposite of what anyone should do.
Sounds like your tongue would go numb and you'd have harder, vocal control.
Right. It's better to... I mean, I get why they did this, because it was for the visual aspect, but generally speaking, it would be better not to drink anything than to drink something that's cold.
Oh, okay. So if you drink something before a performance or something, it has to be room temp?
Yeah. I do think that having the 3 women in the neighborhood as the girl group, singing things, I think that helps with, again, the narrative element where they're explaining what's going on. At the beginning, they're explaining about what Skid Row is and what it's like there.
They keep you up with the story. Mm-hmm. Especially when he, Seymour goes back and he's like, well, this is where I found the plant. It was at this weird herbalist shop in Chinatown or whatever. Mm-hmm. And, they're singing all the backing to what he's describing. So it helps tell the story.
Which I think is very clever and makes sense why they would do that in both the off-Broadway and the film.
The music is really catchy. Seriously, I can't get I'm a Mean Green Mother from Outer Space out of my head. It keeps playing on repeat ever since we watched it. And that plant, voiced by Levi Stubbs of the Four Tops, outsings everyone around it. And of course, we also have Audrey, played by Ellen Greene, who definitely shows her stage singing chops when she just belts out these lyrics. I mean, she has some serious strength.
She really does. In the film, it sounded like she did a really good job of keeping the breathiness as much as she could. I mean, some of those higher notes, you just making that sound breathy and hitting those notes that's so much.
If you wonder why she has such a weak little voice, very breathy, and then just just singing out her freaking heart, shaking the freaking speakers off your off your TV. That's why she's a real singer. She really can do it.
I do love that she played up the Jersey girl accent. I mean, this film clearly and the musical were made to be very campy, very exaggerated, and
yeah, it is exaggerated. It's fun for that reason, but it's also her character being so breathy and I don't know, she just seems very helpless, and it makes her more of a person you want to save from a terrible boyfriend. She's dating the dentist, played by Steve Martin.
I was having such a hard time just being okay, Steve Martin's going to be a bad guy. Okay, just shift your brain. Just suspend your disbelief.
It's hard to believe.
He's so silly all the time.
He's such a silly man.
It's hard to imagine him as a villain, but I mean, he does really well with it, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. They play it up. It's it's overdone, but you can tell she's in an abusive relationship, and Seymour's going to want to rescue her from that. Yeah, and that might involve feeding him to a plant. So originally the movie studio was thinking about hiring Cyndi Lauper as as Audrey.
Which I think would have worked really well.
Would have worked. I could still see that. They also contacted Barbara Streisand. They both turned the role down, and then they were like, oh, but Ellen Greene is doing such a great job on the off-Broadway. Why don't we just have her do it?
I have a harder time seeing Barbara Streisand in that role.
I feel like that's just
not
like, who's
because
hot
she
at
isn't
this time?
talented. Cyndi Lauper kind of makes more sense. She's already very quirky and like exaggerated in herself anyway. So, and clearly she has the pipes. Both of them do, but
I wonder if, Barbara Streisand had done A Star is Born not too long before this. And I wonder if that's why they were like, oh, she's a singer. She's a big commodity in Hollywood right now.
yeah.
Let's talk about the puppets and the practical effects used in the 1986 film. Because, I can't get over how emotive the puppet is for Audrey, too.
I don't know anything about puppetry.
Okay.
But I love what they did with this film.
It's pretty incredible. And they have it at various stages of evolution, right? They have the little bud that starts to move a little bit. They have it a little bit bigger. It starts to move and talk. They have the biggest version, which has more interactive vines and leaves and flower buds that open and close.
Very complex.
There's
looking.
a lot going on there.
Well, isn't there one toward the beginning of its growth where you actually get to watch it grow?
I think you do. I think you do see it grow at some point. And it yes, that's right. Because you see it growing after it had a meal and it literally bursts through the pot that it's in and the roots start shooting out. And when they go back into the shop, you see it much, much bigger.
Yeah.
So that was the to puppet.
Wait,
60.
6-0.
60. But I have to assume for every vine that moves, for every root, for every leaf that curls, for all the miniaturized buds that, open and close their mouths, and for the head itself, there has to be a puppeteer working each individual piece.
This is why you can't make a film without a certain amount of money. 60 people for one piece of machinery, loose term. Then, for this film, that's 60 people who deserve to get paid a living wage.
Yes.
They've done a lot of work.
And these were real high class puppeteers. They came from the Jim Henson Company, which is not surprising because Frank Oz had just finished The Muppets Take Manhattan.
Yeah,
right before this project. Yeah, so we had that Jim Henson. So yeah, Jim Henson Works did the puppets.
This is why networking is very important.
It's so important. A ton of people operating this puppet, right? So you're trying to move all these moving pieces, but you're watching this in the movie and this puppet moves very fast. The lips curl, the vines, do all different things. They act like fingers and stuff. It moves very fast, right? But they couldn't physically move that fast in real time. So what they did is they had to film the puppet in slow motion. They filmed it 16 frames instead of the usual 24 and then sped it up in post.
Okay, so what they had to do was limit the amount of shots they did with the plant and the actors in the same frame.
Because, if your actor is acting at normal speed and the plant is going at half speed, you speed that up for the plant. Oh, now the people look like they're just little chipmunks running around. Mm-hmm. So what did they have to do? They obviously limited the shots with the actors and the plant in the same shot. So, there's more shots of just the plant, just Rick, just the plant. But when they had to have them in the same frame, the actors sang or spoke in slow motion.
That is a tricky thing to do.
Yeah.
I've done it before for music videos.
Oh, okay.
In a music video format, you change the musical track so that it is at half speed so you can play it for the musician. I've done this with other people doing it, and I've done it myself.
That's cool.
And it creates a really cool effect, but it's
That's challenging.
Okay, I'm trying to keep my energy up while I do this very slowly. It's a challenge, I'll say.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to have your perspective on that because I haven't had to do something quite like that. I have filmed things in slow motion and had it sped up later just because it's not physically possible for me to move that fast.
Sure.
I remember one short film I did with a friend. We had these people portraying football stars and they were running this field. And this one guy, he was very athletic. I'm like, look, sir, I need you to run at half speed, okay? I am wearing a steady cam. I'm wearing multiple pounds of equipment on my body. I need you to run at half speed. He said, okay. He bolted down the field, and I'm like, sir, okay, we're going to try this again. 25% speed. And finally we got to a point where I could keep up with him while he was running, but it was difficult.
I think it's hard if you, and especially if this is your first time being filmed when you're doing something athletic and you're used to doing things athletic,
right. You don't
and they're
think
supposed
about
to be
it.
as fast as possible. You don't, it's hard to conceive like, okay, I need to make sure that I match the camera movement.
So the thing is, movies, TV shows, whatever, it's all an illusion, right? There's not really a talking plant there. There's not really, we're not seeing things in real time. We hardly ever see someone in the bathroom. We hardly ever see someone, going to sleep and sleeping in real time. It's distilled, and it's also a representation. You never see the edges of the set. You never see, the video village that's watching them. So it's all an illusion, right? And that's also why you might film something at a different speed, but when you show it in the movie theater, it still looks actiony. It still looks exciting. When they film like fighter jets, like Top Gun style, and they're filming in the cockpit and it's shaking and it's very exciting and oh my God, everything's moving. Do you know how they do that movement?
It probably wasn't nearly as exciting as it looks.
There is a rig that somebody came up with, and it's genius. They attached the camera to a drill, like literally a drill that you drill screws into the wall, and let it vibrate the camera.
Oh.
Isn't that cool?
I was imagining one of those old exercise things that is like a belt that goes around your belly or whatever, and it shakes
vibrates.
you. It's supposed to I guess melt the fat off your body.
I don't really shaking the fat out of you.
I really don't know what that machine was supposed to do.
I've seen that. I remember seeing advertisements for that in like the 90s. They're trying to just wiggle the fat away. I don't understand.
That was what I was imagining for the camera, just putting one of those things.
I could see that too. Honestly, it's whatever gets the job done. You can tell that this was directly inspired from musicals. Just the way the set is built. It looks kind of realistic, but at the same time, you can kind of see the seams where it's like, well, here's these different platforms where the singers will perform. And, it's very much stage-like. And I feel like it got that from its the play that it's based on. And I feel like the film found a great way to blend both mediums. But here's the thing, I had this idea about remakes. They probably shouldn't be exactly like the original. There's a fine line between homage and to original and just copying what was done before. Each version of the story, in this case, morphed a little bit into a slightly different form, and each one is enjoyable on its own merits, whether you watch the 1960 black and white film, the musical on stage, or the movie musical in 1986. Each one is slightly different and has its own merits.
Absolutely. I think each of these is a valid version. I mean, and also like stage play versus film, that's been done so many times. And I think for good reason.
A movie is more accessible because one, it's off Broadway. So, off Broadway, it's literally in New York City. If you can't get to it, you can't see it.
Right.
Until this play goes, nationwide. And it did eventually. And it had multiple revivals. But still, a play is not something everybody can go to. And I totally recommend everyone going out to see plays, musicals, whatever. It's a great experience. Yeah. But not everybody can see that. So the movie kind of, I don't know if this is the right word, but democratizes it, makes it more accessible for people, because now people can see it in the movie theater. There's movie theaters everywhere. Eventually it was on video on demand. Eventually there were VHS tapes. There were eventually DVDs on streaming, etc.
Don't forget the laser discs.
Laserdisc.
But yeah, it's the same thing with music too. Like going to see a band perform versus getting to get the record and take it home with you, so you don't have to be limited to only moments when you can find the band live.
Yeah, it's kind of the beautiful thing about the modern day is that most things are on streaming or most things are somewhere online. So if someone says, hey, I have a band, we're in Albuquerque. Well, I'm not in Albuquerque. Oh, that's fine. Just go check out our Spotify. Go check out our website where we have our songs and you can support us from afar.
Film to film, I feel like it's less forgivable for things to be so closely the same.
Also, we do see different forms of killing in each of the movies. This way, like even a fan of the original can be surprised by change. One way to make a remake would be to have a new angle, a new viewpoint, completely go to a different story, but have the same basic premise. This form of remake keeps the bones of the story, but changes little details. Like, the deaths happen in a different way. And, the ending is different. The original ending was wild.
The absolute most.
You can see it on YouTube. It's up there. My God, you can watch it. It's like 12 minutes. It takes too long to happen. It should have been like 5. But you see the plant eat Seymour. Little Audrey 2s are sold in stores and people mob it like a Tickle Me Elmo on Black Friday, 1996. Audrey 2s grow up nationwide and go on a killing spree, just like Godzilla.
I love it.
This finale cost $5 million.
Just the finale?
And test audiences hated it.
Wow.
They literally went from enjoying the rest of the movie to seeing the ending and giving it a terrible score. So they basically had to film an alternate ending just to make people like the rest of the movie. The film very much became a story of like the ideal lifestyle of the 1950s housewife and this beautiful like owning your own home, having your own life, instead of a commentary on the crushing weight of greed and consumerism.
Which, you know, I was getting that theme from the original when I was watching it too.
Yeah,
like it very much kind of points to that.
The 1986 film ends up with a theatrical release of a happy ending, right? Seymour and Audrey have their beautiful little tract home, their beautiful like little property with AstroTurf. So it's very idealized. It's very dreamlike. It's mostly a happy ending. I mean, you do see a little baby Audrey 2 in the plants, and it does that whole "the end?" ... question mark.
Right.
But it's still a happy ending for the most part. They succeed. How do you
He
feel?
doesn't get eaten.
Yeah, well, how do you feel about a Hollywood ending versus every other version of the story has a negative ending? Usually the main character dies.
I feel like both endings have their place. I think personally I could watch a film, especially one as campy as this, and watch a dark ending and really enjoy it.
Yeah.
But I will say there is a part of me that oftentimes when I watch a film with a dark or questionable ending, I think I really was hoping for some light of hope, some glimmer of hope at the end here.
I'm still an incurable optimist. I like a happy ending.
Yeah.
There are times when I do enjoy not a bad ending, but like an ending where things don't work out, because that's life, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes that's okay if your hero doesn't succeed. Was it still a good story? It just needs to have a satisfying ending.
Right.
And that could go in any direction.
Yeah. Did they learn something at least? Like, is there some kind of progress made through the film? I think you can make a dark ending and have it be demonstrative of a point.
Yeah, you never want to feel like you've cheated the audience or tricked them.
Yeah.
They don't like cheap tricks. They don't like things out of left field. If anything, if your ending is going to be unhappy, you have to have set that up beforehand, that this is a possibility.
How do you feel like is a good way to set that up?
I think you should have details throughout your story that indicate that things might not go well. And it's not just the usual, like, here are the stakes, here's the ticking clock, you know. I think it needs to be very realistic that things won't end well. But maybe it not ending well plays into your main theme of whatever your story is. Like, a lot of classic sci-fi movies seem to have pretty depressing endings.
Yeah.
I mean, we could even look at Solaris, like, oh, well, he's trapped on the planet. He's trapped in this fake lifestyle. I feel like that could be a negative ending, but it fits. I wasn't upset by it. So I think there's something to that.
I think the more I've grown as a person too, for some reason I'm more open to dark endings, whereas now I can find more enjoyment in a dark ending if it's, or more satisfaction at least, if it's like, okay, I understand why they did it this way, because it furthers the points they're trying to make, you know?
Yeah. Now, I think the consumerism was a very good thing for them to tap into, because ultimately Little Shop of Horrors is about greed, and it's about overlooking like negative things and things that are going to be detrimental to your soul in order to make a buck.
Yeah.
And or to get the girl of your dreams. Like, at the end of the day, he didn't have to feed that plant, but he felt like he did.
I do think Mr. Mushnick could have been more of a greedy character than he was.
Yeah.
I mean, he was definitely up for the money grab, but there was definitely a point also where when he realized people were being murdered, he was not exactly on board with that either.
He wasn't on board with it, but like...
Whereas I feel like if you were really digging into that point,
Yeah.
he would be like, yeah, that's fine, whatever. Like, I'm making so much more money now.
Right, you could have really leaned into the plot that way.
Yeah.
So I looked up real quick some movies with unhappy endings that people still love.
Okay.
A great example is The Green Mile. Have you seen The Green Mile?
It's been so long. He gets executed at the end,
He
right?
does.
Yeah,
and
okay.
it is a traumatic and sad story. But at no point in this movie do you... I mean, you might have a little bit of hope, but it's very believable that he will never escape his sentence. given the time and place that he's in and the things
What
he's
was
been
he
charged with. He was charged
convicted of?
He was charged with killing 2 little girls.
Oh.
But what happened was he showed up after the killing had taken place, and he was trying to help them. And he was basically framed for murder.
Well, and that makes a racial point, too,
It was racial
doesn't it?
because John Coffey was African-American, and it was, I forget what the time period was, but I'm going to say it was around the 60s, 50s.
Yeah, I want to say mid-century-ish, if I'm remembering right, but it's been a long time.
But yeah, so that was very much fitting with that theme. Castaway apparently had a negative ending. I don't remember that.
Castaway, well,
I thought he got off the island.
he eventually does get off the island, but when I guess they would consider it a negative ending because when he goes to find who was his fiance, she's married to someone else.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You can tell there's a lot of emotional turmoil that's happening for her as well as for him when they each have their own realizations, like, he's still alive, oh my God, and he was someone who I loved so much that I wanted to marry, but now I'm married to someone else and I'm happy. Presumably she's happy in her current relationship, otherwise she would have been like, fuck this guy, I'm running off with you now. And clearly he, is going through the emotional turmoil of like, I held hope for such a ridiculous period of time where I was stuck on this island, and my hope that held me together until my rescue turned out to be false anyway, like, because she's moved on, which understandably, I think it was like 5 years or something he was on that island.
He was there for a while. So it was safe to assume that he had passed away. I mean, she had to move on at some point. I get it.
Yeah.
Another example on here was Stand By Me.
I don't remember the ending of that one.
I don't remember all the ending. I remember like the characters go, well, for one thing, they find what they're looking for, and it wasn't what they expected, I think. But also the ending, I think they give that like, well, Johnny went off to do this and blah, 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 and somebody died of an overdose. So like there's some downer stuff that happens with like what happens to them in the future.
Right.
But I feel like the rest of the story was just so complete and so interesting that people weren't too bothered with it. Because at the end of the day, like, Seymour is, he's supposed to be a likable character, but he never says, he says no in the beginning. He's kind of like, no. Well, okay, maybe it'll help me. So he is suckered in by the idea of he could have anything he wants.
I think he's also just kind of a pushover to begin with.
I mean, at one point he's even like in the 60s movie, he's mind controlled by the plant to go out and kill and feed the plant some more, and that's when he goes after a couple people.
The plant actually hypnotizes him, which is the same period of time when the sex worker
that's when
kind
he
of
meets
tries
her.
to lure him in.
So yeah, I mean, I think you can see very clear themes about that. It's also about the American dream and the fact that like Ellen Greene's character, Audrey, is just dreaming of some place that's green, dreaming of a better life, dreaming of something out of this dirty, dirty place that they live in. And she believes in like this, basically the 1950s housewife idea of like, I'm going to cook dinner and it's going to be beautiful and we're going to have our 2.5 kids and we're going to have our enormous 12-inch TV.
Right.
Like it's playing into that. She wants that because that's the best life she can imagine. And he wants her. He wants money. He wants stability.
Yeah, and I guess growing up not having anything, any stability or money, or having as in this 1960 version, having a lecherous mother, like I could see how he would want something for himself too. Like that's totally understandable and valid.
Yeah, I think so too.
But yeah, I mean, do the ends justify the means? That's a great question that we will always wrestle with, it seems, through time. This was a good choice for a remake.
I think so too.
And I know that, I mean, maybe I guess the original idea of the remake was the Broadway.
Yeah, the first version of the remake is on stage, right?
Yeah.
But it changes another form and we get the movie. But I think it's fair to say that this was a good way to do a remake of this story. It's basically the same story for the most part with some added details, with some things changed around. But like the idea of presenting it as a musical was immediately a game changer, immediately transmuted it into a different form. And I think that's important. So obviously the way I've been gushing about this movie, I think it was a good idea, right? I really love the remake, and I never would have realized that 1960s film existed, or even the short story by H.G. Wells, if I didn't know about the 1986 film. So yeah, I think it deserves to exist. This is a remake I can get behind. I'm not all doom and gloom when it comes to remakes and sequels. I think some are really good. I think some are worthy of existing. Sometimes they're off base. Sometimes they don't work.
Yeah.
But there's others that are definitely cash grabs. So
yeah. Well, I think this one is like a great film in its own right. And I love that it had two different sources to kind of pull from. Obviously, it pulls a lot from the stage play. But it still obviously is very inspired by the original film. And I kind of hate to say it, but like just like the visual, like the quality of the 1960 film, like, and I mean, I watched it on YouTube, like, so the resolution probably wasn't great to begin with, but it also was really blown out looking, and the black and white one was rough.
It's still roughly made because you can tell that they made this movie in a few days.
Yeah.
I think they did the exteriors on like a couple of weekends once, and that was how they filmed this whole thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a little rough.
Not only did they take that classic story and like redo it in a more like technically better, you know, a more advanced like materials, basically, like they used, you know, newer film, and it just looks a lot more professionally done. Obviously they spent more time on it
polished.
too, but like also that they added in the musical element.
I think they leaned into the silly to make this movie. It's, for one thing, it's not scary. It's a comedy horror, but it's not scary, really. The deaths are comedic, right? And they play it up with, like, you've got this monstrous plant, but it's sitting there and it's tapping its vines like fingers. It's using the payphone to call Audrey and be like, "Hey, babe, it's me." Like, so they made it very funny and over the top. And I think that helped cement it as a movie that people still go back to today.
So would you say this remake is justified in having been made?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely of that camp.
Definitely, they should have.
Yeah, I know in the future we're not going to be so sure. And I can't wait to explore that more.
I agree on all of those points you just made.
Thank you.
I'm really glad they made this film. I'm glad that the Jim Henson puppets got to be a part of it, because obviously they do amazing work. Muppets are great. Sesame Street's great. I love it all.
Yeah. That's bye for now. And remember, don't garden during an eclipse. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, all that jazz. Follow us on Spotify for the latest episodes. And remember, never garden during an eclipse.